This is the High School Crossfire. Welcome back.
Panel, the team that is able to win this kind of debate is the one that will be able to cite the leading problem and also show how, when dealt with, will handle the problem of the food insecurity at hand. Now, Team Negative talks about the climate change being the major cause of food insecurity in Uganda. Now, you realize through our first speech, we talked about 80% of the land in Uganda being credible for food production, that is by FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization. And on top of that, Uganda is in the tropical region. It experiences 2 seasons. Uganda is surrounded by lakes, rivers, and all this continues to prove that Uganda is able to, Uganda land is credible enough to cater for the food production. Now, they talked of acidic rain.
Your idea, Speaker.
Rest. They also talked about land in Uganda that is not being used for food. But then you realize that areas that should be used for food production are being encroached on, because during that land subdivision, land that is even credible and that is arable is being encroached on and subdivided, hence reducing land for crop production. Now, we talked about land subdivision leading to land fragmentation. You realize that land is divided into several parcels, basically for industrial use and residential purposes. Land that is arable and fertile is divided into parcels, hence reducing land for crop production. This leads to land fragmentation, since when people are being chased away from some land, they crowd in some other land, and then land is forced to be divided into fragments.
Idea, Speaker.
This will lead to land fragmentation. And when land fragmentation is, you realize it becomes difficult to even use modern farming methods such as irrigation, mechanization. And on top of that, you also realize that land fragmentation reduces on the scale for crop production. Since people will no longer produce crops on a large scale, people will only produce subsistence crops that can only earn them and their families, and hence leading to food insecurity. We also talked about land subdivision leading to reduced economies of scale. Now, I realize that because of all the plots being divided, crops that are grown will be very few. And if few crops are grown, that means farmers will get very, very few profits. If there are few profits, that means there will be inflation in the country. And if there is inflation, it will be very difficult for each and everyone to access food. And then you also realize that if the profits are less, there will be high costs of production, hence contributing to the food insecurity. We also talk about inefficient use of resources. Realize that when the arable land is used for industrial residential purposes, you render useful resources to waste. You realize that we talked about the 37% only out of 80% of the land good for agriculture purposes is also encroached on by the land subdivision. It's also subdivided and then used for residential purposes and industries. And you know that when this is done, we are wasting this good land. We are wasting the resources, the fertile soils. And when this is done, you realize that we are rendering the good resources. It's like we are terming them valueless. And this will force farmers to do cultivation on dry land. And if we cultivate on dry land, that means we're going to get extremely, extremely low production. And if this is done, it will contribute to the food insecurity in Uganda. Therefore, we believe that with this, the land subdivision is a major cause of the food insecurity in Uganda, since it is also the cause of climate change, as they claim. Thank you.
Well, dear panel, what do we observe from team proposition? Well, first of all, they come here and tell us people are being chased from their land. What is chasing them? What is chasing them is what climate change which we are pushing forward. I'll give an example of the Karamoja sub-region. In Karamoja, people are being pushed away because the desert climate is pushing more of what into the eastern region, is pushing them more into Soroti. So this is going to push them further down into what? Central and Chigezi regions, therefore leading to the subdivision of land which we're talking about. Furthermore, they talk about people don't have enough food 80% of the land is used for food production. That is what they are fronting. Therefore, what the other 20% is not used for. And then they are telling us that 37 is what is used. Therefore, they say that insufficient use of resources. Allow me to show you that they're the ones that are leading this. They are dividing land to set up settlements. They are dividing land, set up resources. To set up what? Set up industry. So in actual sense, they're the ones insufficiently using the resources. Allow me have a quick lesson with team proposition, because clearly they are unaware. Are you aware that Ethiopia, Rwanda, China, and Japan, This is a case study. These countries have land subdivision, and on top of that, they are facing climate change. But when they realize that land subdivision is not a major cause, what is the major cause of unsustainable food development in their countries is actually climate change. So they decided to mitigate climate change itself. And now we are seeing that they are among the top producers of food in the world. Therefore, how did they mitigate climate change? They use methods, for example, agroforestry, reducing the deforestation rates, controlled use of chemicals, fertilizers, and so on. All these methods, when they applied them, there was a reduction in the effects of what climate change. Therefore, we are saying it cannot be land subdivision as they are fronting in actual sense. It is climate change that brings out land subdivision. As my first speaker showed you, we as team opposition strongly believe that it's not land, but it's actually what? It is climate change that is leading to the cause of unsustainable food production. As my first speaker came and told you, sustainable food production is not only looked at in terms of rejected. It's not only looked at in terms of what? Sufficiency, but as well as quality. So, climate change is going to reduce rejected. It's going to reduce the quality of food. How does it do that? Climate change is going to affect most of the crop's nutritional value. This is seen in the research that was carried out by Dr. Sam Meyers, the director of the Planetary Health Alliance at the Harvard Chan School, on the effects on climate change on the food crops, where it was found out that when food crops, for example, rice, wheat, maize, and cassava, are exposed to higher amounts of carbon dioxide due to climate change, rejected due to climate change, as much as 20% of the zinc, as much as 15% of the iron composition, and 10% of the protein content in these plants is going to reduce. We see that the deficiency of such minerals in people's bodies is going to negatively affect their health. I'll give an example. It's going to lead to maternal mortality, where people are going to die. How are they going to die? Parents, when mothers are giving birth, because they have eaten or they have been feeding on climatically affected food, they are not going to have enough blood in their bodies. Moving on, even if these people, they are fronting land subdivision, but even if we had vast amount of land, even if we had enough land and it wasn't subdivided, we are seeing that climate change is going to still lead to unsustainable food production. How? We are seeing that there are extreme weather conditions. We are seeing that we are seeing that there's unpredictable weather patterns, whereby a farmer is going to plant his crops during the wet season. Abruptly, we are going to have a dry season. His crops are going to die out. We are going to have flash floods. When flash floods come in, they're going to wipe out the crops. So you're planted on a vast piece of land, but due to climate change effects, it's going to be wiped out. Allow me to give a case study of these countries: Argentina, Ukraine, Zimbabwe, and Australia. All these have vast amounts of land. They have enough land, but due to the fact they're facing climate change, they cannot utilize this land. Whenever they try to utilize the land, what happens? They're going to be wiped out by the extreme weather conditions. The crops they're planting are going to be wiped out. Dear judges, how can team proposition win with such a flimsy case? Clearly, the voice of the matter takes the day. Thank you.
This is the High School Crossfire. We'll be back in a minute.